Today we are going to talk about meditations for concentration and wisdom. The meditations oriented towards developing concentration are usually called Shamatha practices, and the meaning of Shamatha is single-pointed attention, and the purpose of these practices is to focus the mind on one object single-pointedly in order to develop strong attention and concentration. In these practices, we are not analyzing or reflecting on a topic, but we are just fixing our attention in an object as an anchor to the present, and it helps us bring mindfulness to the practice, but mindfulness in the sense of bringing the attention back to the object. And what we want to develop is a very good sense of relaxation, and on top of this, cultivate stability in the sense of being able to sustain the object of attention for longer and longer periods without distraction, and finally to develop vividness or clarity. And this counteracts the aspect of falling asleep or being dull. So normally we are very distracted by thoughts, by stimuli, by everything. And these practices of concentration help us overcome that agitation and distraction and bring the mind to the center, to the present, but without making effort, without getting tight. Because if we develop concentration getting very tight, then we are not able to sustain it for longer and longer periods. And we want to be able to sustain it for longer periods. So these practices have a purpose, and is to balance the mind. We saw this in the previous episode where we talked more about the Shamatha practice and mindfulness, and we clarified what is what. And now we want to distinguish between the Shamatha practices, the concentration practices, also called Shamatha, and the Vipassana practices, which are for developing wisdom meditations. And in these practices, we are not only observing something with attention, but we are actually doing an analysis. We are discerning, we are investigating, and we are getting to know reality in the way it exists. So when we do a Vipassana meditation or a wisdom meditation, the very basic ones, we are observing everything that arises in our body, but not only observing it with mindfulness, we are also analyzing, investigating if those tactile sensations that arise to our perception, are they ours? Do they belong to us? Are they permanent? Are they impermanent? Can we say we are that body, that those parts that arise as the body to us? And then after doing this analysis, we also investigate feelings, mental events, and finally we apply this wisdom to all phenomena. Another kind of meditations also within the group of wisdom are analytical meditations, in which we analyze an event of our life in which we acted with anger or with attachment or with a mental affliction, and by observing it carefully and investigating the causes and conditions that gave rise to that situation or that event, we analyze if this is really the way in which things existed, or if we were projecting negative qualities or positive qualities and then grasping to these ideas, these conceptions. And we also analyze ways in which we could have related with those events and those persons or situations in a different way that was more constructive, in order to learn from our experiences and transform ourselves, and in the future act with more wisdom. Also, there are other meditations which focus on the aspect of emptiness of inherent existence of phenomena. And in those meditations, we analyze how things lack this real independent existence that we project onto them, and that they are actually interdependent phenomena that arise due to causes and conditions, and that there is not an intrinsic independent reality to them. In that way, we analyze them, and finally we analyze the self, which also feels like something very real and substantial, but ultimately is not independent and is not existing in an inherently permanent and substantial way. So these are meditations for developing wisdom in relation to the understanding of reality, the understanding of phenomena, and how we exist in relation to these phenomena. So these are the two groups of meditations oriented towards concentration and wisdom. And the point here is that we need both. Why? Because if we only have concentration, there's a very nice metaphor that many masters use to teach their students the combination of these two groups of practices. And this is, when you have concentration, it's like having an axe and wanting to cut a tree, but hitting in different parts of the tree or the roots. If you don't have concentration, you're hitting in different parts, right? And it's never going to fall. But if you have concentration, you can hit in the same spot again and again, and then you might be able to throw down the tree. But if that axe is not sharp, no matter if you hit on the same place again and again, you're never going to throw it down. So you need it to be sharp, and the sharpness corresponds to the wisdom. So in the same way, if you have the wisdom but you don't have concentration, let's say you have an axe that is very sharp but you're hitting in different parts of the tree, you are not going to throw down the tree. So you need to hit in the same place, that will be the concentration, and you need it to be sharp, that will be the wisdom. Only in that way you can cut the roots of mental afflictions, which are ignorance, attachment, and aversion, from which all other mental afflictions arise. So we need both. We need concentration and we need wisdom. And there are different methods, different techniques, different meditations to develop that concentration. In the same way, there are different methods and techniques to develop that wisdom. But once you develop the concentration or once you develop the wisdom, they are the same. They are just different ways to reach through those methods, and they are the same with respect to other practices that lead to the same wisdom or the practices that lead to the same concentration. Once you develop the concentration, once you develop the wisdom, then you can join them and use them simultaneously. But it's easier to develop them separately. Now, it is possible to develop them together, but only people with very sharp faculties are able to do this, because it's very difficult to analyze and understand reality while you're distracted. So it's better to develop first a sharp concentration like a laser beam, and then use it to develop wisdom with the practices of Vipassana. So these are the meditations. I invite you to try them, to do them, to read books about this. One book that I recommend very much for meditations and concentrations is called The Attention Revolution by my teacher, Dr. Alan Wallace. And a book that I recommend for wisdom is Meditations on Emptiness by Jeffrey Hopkins, also an academic. And there are other books and there are different techniques. But I invite you to do research, to find them, to do guided meditations, and to really understand what are the differences and how to do them correctly. You're welcome to come to my website and see some of my guided meditations, and I hope they are helpful for you. Thank you. It's been a pleasure sharing with you, and hope to see you soon. Please consider supporting this podcast at patreon.com/Alma Ayon.
Thanks for listening to Peace in Mind with Alma Ayon.